There is an epidemic going on right now. It started with Ronaldinho before he attempted to shill another NFT. Then it was R9. Then it was Wayne Rooney. All of them saying different versions of the same thing, essentially saying that the modern game has gotten boring to them and they're not particularly interested in watching it. Some sort of type of that. That modern soccer or football has now become a shell of its former self, and it's just not something, not necessarily worth watching, but something that's perhaps gotten more boring. There have been different versions of this argument from time to time. They usually stem from Pep Guardiola, who is thought to be the godfather of the way of thinking about the way teams play now, which is essentially, as Wayne Rooney described it, and I thought this is a pretty apt way to describe it, you're always looking to score the perfect goal. There's a lot of teams and a lot of coaches that are trying to create a situation where you score the perfect goal or none at all, but they just aren't as good as Pep Guardiola is at it, so they don't score the perfect goal all that often, right? And that is essentially where Wayne Rooney was saying this issue sits. Now, I do almost feel uncomfortable, given my accent and everything, trying to dive in and talk to you all about whether this is actually right or not, but it would feel stupid to not talk about it at all, because three is a party, right? I mean, that is the start of the orgy right there once you got three people involved. So it has now reached the critical mass that we need to talk about the fact that the players are saying the game is boring. And I think in some ways they do have a point. Because there is a natural progression that a sport goes through. You can track it. I'm somebody that grew up surrounded by a lot of different sports, and you can always kind of track this progression of the sports. There is always going to be the next progression to win, right? Because at the end of the day, as much as people will wax poetic about the beauty of football, the only thing that matters to the people actually involved in the game, in the moments that count, is who wins, which means the people that are going to be at the top of the game, the people that are going to get rewarded, the people that are going to be emulated, the people that are going to be put on pedestals, the people that are going to make the most money and get the biggest spotlight are very often the people that win, right? You do not end up in a situation too often where players are deified when they aren't part of the winning team. I mean, Pep Guardiola is thought to be the best coach because he wins all the time. Sure, he's always coaching a Rolls Royce, but just because you're driving the Red Bull doesn't mean you get to win every race. I'm looking at you, Checo or Chico, however I don't really watch F1. I'm looking at you, Perez. But I will hesitantly agree with the legends here that the progression that we have undergone in the game of soccer, in the game of football, towards what you are supposed to do in order to win games, towards the best way to win games, towards all of these people that are in these high-powered suits and these high-powered jobs making high-powered decisions, all of those decisions leading to the eventual outcome of winning more games than the other guy, of beating the other guy in the most important match of all of those decisions have led us to a point where the game is at least more restricted. Now, we've been headed this direction for a long time, right? If you ever watch those colorized old matches from like 1960 at the World Cup, it looks like a completely different sport. Like we always talk about Garrincha and Pele and talk about their greatness, and we see the same one or two clips of them doing something that looks vaguely modern on a pitch. But if you actually watch the full match back then, it feels like it's in slow motion. Right, there is more activity in a U21 Premier League match than there is in the 1958 World Cup final. Right, they just didn't run much. Right, there wasn't a lot of running relative to what we have now. You see a lot of standing around, and when you're watching it, the back of your mind is screaming out, "Close them down!" Right, like nobody's closing anything down. The structure's not really there, and a lot of things that have progressed and gotten better as teams have gotten better has made the game feel more restricted and limited, and like the confines in which players are able to operate feel much tighter because there isn't as much freedom. Because back in the day, there just wasn't a lot of pressing and closing down, and there was a lot more freedom to try stuff. Now, everybody on every team everywhere seems to be pushing themselves to the physical limit in terms of how much you can run within 90 minutes in terms of closing the other team down and pass and move and making sure you get to the right spot here and making sure you do the right thing there. So this progression is also, because that running is way more valued, put more value in players like a Conor Gallagher. Not to say that he's not 20,000 times more technically skilled than you or I, right? But to say relative to a Premier League midfielder 10, 15 years ago, Conor Gallagher is not as technically skilled as you would typically need to be in the English national team. Now, he is, however, a way better athlete. Right. And I'm not talking just about athletics here. I'm talking about game sense as well. But Conor Gallagher's somebody that can eat up a lot of space in a modern system where being able to eat up a lot of space and press and constrict and move, it's something that's valued more than it was before. Now, with the way that these innovations work is there's always a next one. Right. And everybody, this is something I loved studying history when I was growing up. I have a major in history from the University of Virginia. I had to write a whole dissertation on methods of communication in the Ottoman Empire in order to complete that history major. Right. So I'm like, academically speaking, a history person, not just somebody that watches like documentaries and stuff. Although I do that as well. I have a bunch of cool hobbies like watching documentaries on TV and watching documentaries also on YouTube. It's great. I don't really know what the outside looks like, but we'll get there eventually. I feel like it's going to be waiting for me either way. You know, I can go reunite with the grass anytime I want to. The point I was trying to get to, though, is that historically speaking, one thing you always, when you're studying various historical periods, people really struggle to think about the future, right? If you're reading something that somebody wrote in Greece, they're not really, like, if they're writing it down for posterity, the posterity they're thinking about, it doesn't really extend past your grandkids, right? It extends like maybe 100 years into the future. You're not thinking about the fact that some idiot who talks into a camera for a living, a genius who talks into a camera for a living, is going to be reading that 2,500 years later, right? From now, I'm not thinking about maybe one of these Zealandism videos survives 2,500 years from now, and everybody 2,500 years from now, with this limited information that they're provided, believes that I was some sort of god or deity that ruled over a large portion of the earth with my mustache and forehead. Honestly, wouldn't be super opposed to that. That would be a really exciting human geography class, and I really hope that I get to take a class on my own incredible. But you understand how this works, right? You can't really conceive how things are going to happen in the future. But what we can do is look into the past, all right? And if you look 15, 20 years ago, the number 10 was the most important position in the sport. And then we transitioned to this 4-3-3 where there was no number 10, and those teams started to win, which is why everybody started to play that way. Right. And there is going to be there's going to be another evolution. Right. And so it's not like we're stuck in time here forever where the game is going to be played this way. So while all these three guys are looking at it and thinking, well, it's a little boring right now, there's going to be somebody that comes along and plays it a different way. And that new way is going to be it's going to be really exciting. And we're all going to enjoy it. And it's going to blow up the status quo. And it's going to have some fancy name that's never English somehow, right? Whether it's the Catenaccio or the Gagan Press. I think France is up next. It's their turn to come up with something. So it's going to be some Olympic Lyon coach that really pioneers a different way to play, right? And we're going to continue that progression. If you look at soccer or football over 100 years ago, people were playing with like 8 strikers, 8 forwards on the field, and then there were just like a couple people back there trying to disrupt the counterattack, basically. The game has evolved and changed so much, even from the time these guys were playing. Wayne Rooney being the last of the 3 that was really kind of holding out, but Ronaldinho wouldn't fit in today's game. You know what I mean? Like the closest you could probably get to Ronaldinho is somebody like Jack Grealish in terms of that vibrant off-the-field party life. But Ronaldinho's position was obvious. You know, Ronaldinho was one of those vaunted 10s the majority of the time, and that's just not a position that's valued in the sport anymore. He wouldn't have been able to have been put on the field in that position. And to be perfectly honest, players are always getting better too, which means that if you had Ronaldinho 22 years ago and you popped him down in the Premier League, not only would he not have a position to play on, because players are always getting better and fitness is always getting better and your freaking pregame stretching is always getting better and strategies are getting tighter and everything. You know, like if you took that Ronaldinho or that Pele, you want to go back as far as you can and put them on a field in the modern Premier League, they just wouldn't be nearly as good as they were. Right? That just because of that's just the way things are, you know. So the game has changed from the time that they were even out there. It's going to continue to change. But as I acknowledged earlier in this, I almost don't even know how to feel. It's weird because it's one thing when the internet has these conversations on the side, when the internet goes, oh, you know, we don't have players like Ronaldinho anymore. We don't. And I loved the insane creativity of players like Ronaldinho, or even like a Mesut Ozil, like these people that they were a bit of a live wire, a bit volatile, but you felt like when they were on, when they were there, they could do special things that other people just couldn't do. That's an exciting feeling. You're like living on the edge. It's like ordering the spicy at a Thai restaurant and hoping it doesn't blow your asshole off. Like that's the sort of, right, you're playing with fire here, and you're really hoping that it goes in your favor, or if you're the other team, you're really hoping they're having an off day because they had a tough night at the club the night before. But to hear to hear these actual players come out and say the same thing that a lot of us are kind of thinking, it's weird. I think it's just weird, and it's a little uncomfortable. And what I hope doesn't happen. Here's what I hope doesn't happen. I hope nobody goes in and tries to change any of the rules. I think one of the things that American sports does a lot is the American sports really try to tailor the product on the field or the court or the ice or wherever. They try to tailor the product through rules to be more entertaining. And to me, the lack of rules, to me, the freedom to just put 22 dudes between lines and just roll the ball out there, and whichever team can put the ball in the net more is the team that wins the game, that freedom is awesome. And I don't want to see us go down a path where rules and restrictions are introduced to try and preserve the beautiful game, because the beautiful game will self-correct, right? And also, as much as we love these beautiful, majestic long shots and long dribbling runs that are seemingly being removed from the game because they're not as statistically likely to work and so on and so forth, it's not like the sport's not exciting. Watch this Euros for 5 seconds and tell me that you're still not having a great time and excited by it. Sure, the way the goals are scored is different. Sure, the way the game is played is different. But the sport, the raw emotions that the sport can still give you because of the freedom that it has. It's just 11 dudes from one country, 11 dudes from another country. Go out there and take care of business. Let's see what happens. There's going to be controversial calls. There's going to be controversial non-calls. There's going to be controversial goals. There's going to be drama, right? All of that stuff has all existed in sports since the beginning of time, since two cavemen started throwing a rock back and forth in a cave, right? Like, all of that stuff is always going to be a part of the game, but the excitement, that raw excitement, whether it's Hungary's late goal, right? Whether it's the retaking of the penalty for Poland, or whether it's Austria, Netherlands, whether it's Georgia stunning Portugal, that excitement is still there. So is the game different and more boring in some ways? Yes, but I think the thing that makes the game the best, right? The thing that makes the game the most exciting, the core of the excitement of the game, I think it's still there. And the next great tactical innovation will hopefully take us in a direction that is a bit more free-flowing. I agree with Wayne Rooney on that.